Welcome to Equinox, where Rob and I are striking the balance between the light and the dark. This is episode 13. My name is Joseph Darnell, and I'm joined by my good friend, the doctor, Robert Carter. Hello, Rob. How are you doing?
Joe.
It is great to be back on the show. Feels like we missed more weeks than we have just because it has been, these have been long weeks.
We've only missed 1 week.
I know, but it feels like the last 3 weeks have been 6 or 7.
Yeah, I've done a lot of things in the last 7 days. Yeah.
I think I've added some more gray hairs.
I've got plenty. You can have some of mine.
Yeah. Do they match? I don't need a transplant. We have been working a lot lately, but I think that the workload is going to die down now. So I'm going to be able to get some regular work weeks done.
Cool.
And I love working from home. Are you still working from home?
Still working from home. Still sitting in the same wooden chair I've sat in for the last 2 months.
Nice.
Yeah.
Do you work at the kitchen table? Do you have a home office?
Actually, I have a spare bedroom I could use as a home office.
Yeah.
But I literally have a TV tray and a chair in my living room.
Nice.
Near the window.
Oh,
That's why I'm sitting there. I could sit in the kitchen if I wanted to. But I've also got a porch furniture out on my front porch, wicker furniture. And so if it's warm enough to sit without shivering,
and not too humid that you're getting stuffy.
not so humid like it's going to be in a month or so, it's just miserable, I'll sit out on the porch and enjoy the birds and the neighbor's dog and the kids running around. And
I was outside today on our front porch and listening to the bird songs. And I heard one that just really sounded like a laser gun. Like, and I was like, what is that? And I look over, it's a male cardinal up on my fence. And I say to my wife, didn't that sound like a laser gun? And she listens and then hears it again. And it's like, yeah, it doesn't sound like a normal bird call. Impressive. Very interesting stuff.
have we talked about bird calls on the show yet?
No, we should.
Well, because I've got an app that I've been using all spring, and it is amazing and fun.
Is it an Android or is it, what's the basis
I
of it?
believe you can get
Yeah?
it. No, you can definitely get it on your Borg phones if you like. What's that? Your Mac phone, your iPhone, sorry, your iPhones.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
whatever.
Yep, it's actually recording right now.
Well, I'm not a bird.
No. It's called BirdNet. It's by Cornell Labs.
Nice.
If you're on an iPhone, I think you just search for Cornell Labs. If you're on a Android, search for BirdNet. Just
BirdNet.
BirdNet. And what it does is it'll record any ambient sound. And when you hear something you want to target, you hit pause and you can highlight the area
Where you hear the birds call.
and hit analyze.
That is great.
And it'll tell you, oh, human, Homo sapiens, almost certain.
Are you serious? I thought it was just, I am a human. Golly. The bird app knows that I'm a human.
Well, or cars are also human.
Would it be able to identify then other beasts besides birds?
Not sure.
Maybe not that one because it's not meant for it, but yeah.
But I've
theoretically.
I've pegged about 20 different bird species. In fact, I got a red-headed woodpecker today, which is hard because they don't sit there and call and call and call. They go bloop, bloop, and stop.
Really?
Yeah, but I heard it, hit record, and sure enough, he did it again.
One
Yes.
more time. Yeah.
Boom. So I've got about 20 species recorded. And it's really neat because all these, all my life I've grown up with these sounds, but I was never able to link it to one particular bird species.
Yeah, to keep up with bird calls, you got to be really dedicated.
Yeah, this makes it a lot easier and a lot of fun.
That is neat. But anyone could enjoy that on their phone if they're out jogging. Like we have friends that do want to jog, and they do jog in local historical battleground parks. And I heard bird calls out there, and I was just thinking, this is a fun place to check the bird calls out.
Yeah, that would be a great place. In fact, I went jogging this morning on the Silver Comet Trail, and I went maybe half a mile, and there was a giant feather on the ground. So I picked it up, and I ran the rest of the way with this feather in my hand. But I thought it was a red-shouldered hawk.
Red-shouldered hawk.
Yes, and I put it
We
on
got
Facebook.
plenty of hawks and falcons around here.
Yes, we do. And I put a really dumb haiku on Facebook, and someone said, no, that's not a red-shouldered hawk. That looks like a barred owl.
Oh, I
And
love
so,
owls.
Okay, I said, feather ID, looked it up, barred owl. Sure enough, it's a barred owl feather. And it's beautiful.
Owls are my favorite bird creatures. That is why my podcast website is nightowl.fm. Yeah,
Cool.
And if you pay attention to the logo, you might think it was some sort of like stylized podcasting icon logo image. It's actually a stylization of an owl's eye. So,
Really?
Yeah.
I'm going to type that in right
So
now.
anyone who visits the Night Owl website where you can get the Equinox podcast online, if you go to our website, you'll be able to see the cool, the slick, the modern graphical interpretation of an owl's eye.
So I'm failing here because I went straight to one of the back end places. I just want to go straight to the site itself.
Did you get it?
No.
Just nightowl.fm.
Yeah, I know, but it
It keeps on adding the rest of a longer URL.
Oh, that is an owl.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Super subtle.
I bet as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh yeah, I've seen this logo many times. But I never thought about the logo itself. That's beautiful. Good job.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good job.
I like how the equinox cover art does look like an abstract representation of the equinox on a planet.
Yes.
And I'm very proud of some of my logos. But you've now identified 20-some birds.
Something like that.
What are some of your other favorites?
Well, I happen to have them all here on my phone because I learned that if you hold the off switch and the volume down button at the same time, my phone will go and take a picture of whatever's on the screen. So I've got them cataloged and I've got tons of them. Red-bellied woodpecker.
Will the app tell you like the biographical information as well on the animals?
Oh, yeah, because you can click on a link and go to...
that is neat.
Yeah, the online reference. I got a Carolina chickadee. I got a crow and a mockingbird, another cardinal song, because there's several different cardinal songs. The tufted titmouse.
The tufted titmouse is not a bird.
Yes, it is.
Really? I thought it was a mouse.
No.
That's not how that works?
No.
Anything can be anything these days.
Got the Carolina wren, because they were nesting on my back porch, and the bird would sit on top of the nesting box and make calls, and I stick the phone slightly out the door and record it. The problem is they're easy to forget.
Yeah.
And I've heard that. What was that again? And and so you had to redo it. Yeah, American robin.
I do love the sound of the American robin. And I think that was the first bird that really caught my eye. I just thought that they looked really neat. And I like that song where the robin has the duet with Mary Poppins.
Yes.
Is that the American robin?
Stupid man, I'm so stupid. It's a picture of the screenshot. I was trying to hit the play button. Duh, it's a JPEG.
But does the app not like collect that in your account?
It does, but I'm not in the app.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
in my photo directory. Yeah, I am a scientist.
Well, screenshots have fooled me before too. You ever use screenshots just to get onto a plane in the airport? You take a picture of your ticket in case you lose it in your emails, and then you just use the screenshot to have that scanned when you're at the gate.
I never thought of that before.
Yeah, it's a huge way to save time and effort, because what if the app doesn't work when you're at the gate? It's embarrassing to hold up the line.
That's happened to me several times.
Just get a screenshot.
It's working, die.
Yes.
And you're right there, like, oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me as I reboot my phone.
Right.
Yep.
It'll totally happen.
It has. Okay.
Well, you wanted to discuss corals. It's something that has been burning on your mind. But I thought we had already said everything there was to know about corals, from here to the Indian Ocean.
Actually, I thought we had said everything when it needs to be said about like gravity and orbits and things like that. But there's a lot more to say, and this just happens to overlap in my world of corals also.
Interesting.
So
So this is something new for you about corals, plus
This is going to be
so much more.
a topic that brings up a lot.
Crossover episode. It's like you really had to hear episode 1 and
Yeah.
another episode about, corals.
Yeah,
Like,
we're going
what
to
is
build on that knowledge, but we're also going to bring in a lot of other subjects in science all together in one topic.
that? Nice.
And it's really cool how all this works out.
All right. Well, let's get into it.
Okay.
All right. Corals plus.
Did you know the Earth is slowing down?
I did. And let me give you a little story. This is Joseph in early high school reading a textbook. And there was this idea in the book that in the past, even from a Christian creationist perspective, that the earth may have had shorter days thousands of years ago. Now, I know it's not necessarily the best running theory nowadays, but the theory presented in this curriculum was that per se, maybe at the time of the life of Christ, that the day was less than 24 hours. And then if you go back to the time of Moses, it was a few hours shorter. So if
Wow.
you went back to, according to the curriculum,
I have never heard that before in a young Earth sort of
context.
context.
Yeah.
Because I'd have no idea how you could slow the Earth down that quickly.
Now, I haven't read the curriculum since I was 13, 14.
Okay.
But I remember reading it and thinking, this is astonishing, because it was making a suggestion that maybe at the time of Adam, that a day was as short as 21 hours.
Wow.
So I didn't know what to think about that, and I never heard a scientist that could give a comment.
My mouth is hanging open. Why on earth would anyone say that? I wonder what riddle they were trying to solve by saying something like that. Maybe it's what we're about to bring up.
Okay. Interesting.
I
So shorter
wonder-
days, but do you think it has significantly changed in the last 6,000 years?
No,
Okay.
I think it's changed a little bit.
Okay, a little.
Okay, an ice skater.
An ice skater.
She's on the ice and she's spinning and she pulls her arms in. What happens?
There's a name for this force, but
Conservation of angular momentum.
yeah,
Yeah, okay.
that. And it just means they get super fast
She speeds up and then she sticks her arms out.
and slows down dramatically.
Yeah. The Earth can do that too.
But why Earth can ice skate?
Ice ages.
I see. Ice skating and ice ages.
Oh, that's
I
funny.
see the connection
I
there.
didn't do that on purpose. During the Ice Age, ocean levels were about 300 feet lower than they are today.
Yeah.
And all that ice was piling up on the North Pole and the South Pole.
It's sort of like the ice skater tucking in the arms.
Exactly. It was billions of pounds of water.
Okay, so are we talking about a noticeable difference then? Because that would be a lot of water to affect the entire planet.
If we had the scientific instruments we have today, back 6,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, whenever said Ice Age was, we would definitely notice. We noticed the length of day changed after the Japanese earthquake that caused a big tsunami several years ago. The crust of the Earth moved and it displaced enough mass, it actually changed the spin of the Earth.
Golly.
But we only know that because of atomic clocks and things like GPS satellites and things like that.
Have you explained to our listeners how atomic clocks work? Are we assuming that this is some satellites that are responsible for atomic clocks and they're always reliable? Or are these things that we can measure with clocks on the ground?
both.
Okay. So you can have an atomic clock that's not from a satellite. And would it be able to measure the difference from this ice shift as well?
It would have been
Okay.
if we were around to measure it. There would have definitely have been a change. The Earth would have sped up. It would have spun faster.
Would this also affect things like gravity,
Yes.
but not in a noticeable way, except with scientific instruments?
The gravitational force depends upon how far you are from the center of the Earth. And if the Earth is turning faster, the equatorial bulge will be larger. You'd be farther away from the center if you're on the equator.
Okay.
But all that water moving to the poles means there's less mass around the equator also. And I don't know how it would balance out, but yeah, all those things can be thrown into some formula somehow. Someone could actually make an estimate of the day length.
While we're on that, now
Okay.
you got my wheels turning. Why did the water go to the poles? Is that because as ice built up, it was just making a bigger and bigger cube of ice?
Yeah.
And then the water was draining from the portions closer to the equator.
All the world's oceans went down and the ice built up at high latitudes, shall we say.
And it clearly, it's not like it was just in the North Pole, but the North Pole got pretty big because it came down into the continents on all sides.
Actually, the Arctic Ocean might not have been frozen during the Ice Age.
Wow.
There are islands 100 miles off the current northern coast of Siberia that are littered in elephant bones. We call them woolly mammoths. They were living there during the Ice Age.
I would have just assumed that they got iced during the Ice Age.
You'd assume that, but the creationist model anyway of the Ice Age means you need a lot of heat to evaporate the water that comes down as snow. The creationist model of the Ice Age anyway requires a lot of heat to evaporate the water that comes down as snow, but the snow only builds up on the interiors of continents and on mountain chains.
This isn't new knowledge for creationists.
No.
But you're just connecting the dots to some other science.
I want to bring up another thing that I think most people understand this.
Yeah.
Famous book by Jules Verne.
It's not the Bible then.
No. Around the World in 80 Days.
That one. Yeah.
Okay, great book. Have you read it?
I have, to be
Okay.
honest. I read this one.
Have you seen the Disney movie?
Yeah.
The anti-Christian, pro-Buddhist Disney movie?
Well, yeah, but I mean, I don't
It
remember
makes
it
me
very well.
so mad. As an adult
Yeah?
watching this, I mean, they openly mock Lord Kelvin.
Lord Kelvin.
I mean, we have the Kelvin scale of temperature.
The Kelvin.
That Lord Kelvin, they make him look like a stooge. And then most of the way through the movie, they're in China and everyone's bowing to Buddha, including the lead actress. And she's all googly-eyed and smiling as she's bowing to Buddha.
So weird.
It just made me mad.
Now, is that consistent in the book plus the movie? Or
Oh,
was that-
absolutely not.
Yeah.
No,
okay.
it's modern spin.
Yeah.
Denigrate Christianity. Yeah, praise Buddha. Anyway, now this is gonna be a plot spoiler here. Now, of course, the book's over 100 years old, so if you haven't read it yet, too bad.
Yeah. Spoiler alert is expired.
Yeah, the setup is a moderately wealthy man makes a bet that back in the 1800s, he says, I can go around the world in 80 days. Now, that's not even science. It might have been fiction in the day, or maybe he sat down and said, I think I could, if I do this and this and this and this, he might have added it up and figured it out. I don't know.
Yeah, it's not like The Martian. It's based on science. This is just fiction.
Is it practical or not?
Right.
But what a cool question back then. And so he goes off on his quest. And when he comes back, the midnight bell is tolling in town. He didn't make it.
But it was a noble effort. He made it in 81 days.
Well, he wakes up the next morning, goes about his day, and right at the end of the evening, he realizes he did make it. He had seen 80 sunsets, but London had only seen 79.
Right.
Because he went east. He went through India, through China, through North America, across the Atlantic Ocean. He didn't chase the sun. He ran toward the sun, and he actually gained an extra sunset.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And so that's the plot twist. The whole thing it's at the end of the book. You're like, oh, you never even think of it. And boom. And so he wins the bet at the last second.
And it does sound like good science fiction at that point.
It is amazing. Science. He went eastward. Now, look at the solar system from space. I go way up in space and look down from the Earth's North Pole. Which way does the Earth go around the sun? Clockwise or counterclockwise?
I picture it counterclockwise.
Counterclockwise. Which way does the Earth rotate?
Counterclockwise?
Counterclockwise. The sun comes up in the east and sets in the west.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Earth is turning... Yes, counterclockwise.
Yeah.
I had to work that in my head.
Yeah.
The moon is also moving counterclockwise.
And it's not something that we necessarily notice just because the same side of the moon is always facing Earth.
If you stop the Earth,
then you would see the moon.
You see the moon
rotating.
moving through the sky counterclockwise.
Right.
So the Earth has to turn a little bit more every day to catch up to where the moon is. So everything's going in the same direction. In the book, Around the World in 80 Days, they went counterclockwise.
Mm-hmm.
And they had an extra day. Didn't realize it. Okay. Now, all that is to say why tides work.
Tides work because of Around the World in 80 Days?
Well, no. It's the moon pulls on the Earth. The Earth pulls on the moon.
Yeah.
They're actually falling towards each other.
Falling? Why do you say falling?
Because if you put the Earth and the moon in space and held them there, like far away from the sun, there's nothing around at all, just an Earth and a moon, make them 250,000 miles apart, and then let go.
Such as they are.
What would happen?
The gravitational forces draw them together.
Yeah, and they smash together. Now, so they are falling towards each other. They just happen to be moving sideways. So they
enough that
miss.
they just don't.
They always miss. It's the same way if you drop a rock, it moves toward the Earth. Mm-hmm. If you throw a rock, it moves toward the Earth.
Even though, yeah.
And it would hit the Earth in the same amount of time as if you dropped it. Mm-hmm. If you shot a rock in a cannon, you might theoretically be able to shoot it over the horizon. It would always be falling, but it just might miss the Earth.
So when you say miss the Earth, it may just keep going through the atmosphere and beyond?
Okay, let's use the moon as an example because there's no atmosphere, right? You can throw a rock on the moon. It'll go in a nice parabolic arch and then hit the Earth again.
Right.
Shoot it in a cannon, go in a parabolic arch, and if you do it hard enough,
it misses. It just
misses.
Curves around
It'll always
the planet.
be falling toward the moon, but it can't hit the moon because it's moving sideways too fast.
Right.
And it becomes a circular orbit. You can literally orbit the moon 1 foot above the moon if you had a clear path. So go up above the highest boulder or the highest hill on the moon, and you could orbit and just skim the surface.
Now you got me wondering, do we have something like a satellite that orbits the moon?
Oh, yeah. The Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter.
I forget about that.
That has taken all the pictures of the Apollo landing sites. We even see their footprints.
Oh, that's so cool.
It's unbelievable.
So we already have an example of an object doing this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but it's not on the surface. It's high up. So they take good pictures, but...
Yeah, they never wanted to like crash into Mount Moon.
No, that'd be bad. All right, so the Earth is falling toward the moon. The moon is falling toward the Earth.
Sure.
Even though the Earth doesn't
like ice
move,
skaters.
In some ways.
Yeah.
But even though the Earth doesn't move much, we are definitely falling toward the moon. It is pulling us toward itself. We are pulling the moon toward us. It works both ways.
Okay.
All right. Because of all this, the Earth is a big rock, right?
Yes.
But isn't it true in gravity that things that are closer accelerate faster? There's more gravitational force when you're closer.
Yes.
So shouldn't the close side of the Earth fall toward the moon faster than the far side of the Earth?
Oh, as big as it is, it could theoretically could.
It actually does a little bit. The Earth does stretch a little bit. Even the rocks, they stretch a little bit.
Yeah, it's pretty minor, but it could, yeah.
It could be 3 feet sometimes.
Whoa. But
3-foot tide.
Well, the water. Now you're talking about the water.
Yeah, but the water is free to move.
Yes.
But water doesn't stretch, and you can't lift water up off the surface of off the bottom of the ocean. There's not going to be a gap there or anything, right?
Yeah, not like a superhero movie or something.
No.
Somebody with water powers.
Yeah, that'd be crazy. So the water right under the moon doesn't move toward the moon, but the waters to the left and the right, they're being pulled toward the moon, but they're being pulled sideways. They actually wrap around the Earth and go toward the moon. And the water flows in that direction, and it makes a bulge under the moon.
The water, the amount of water on the side facing the moon.
Yes, because those waters are falling toward the moon faster than the Earth itself.
Of course it is. Yeah.
But on the far side, those waters aren't falling toward the moon that fast. So what we have is three things: water on the close side, the Earth, and water on the far side.
Water on the close side, what do you mean?
The water on the side closest to the moon falls toward the moon faster than the Earth.
Mm-hmm.
The Earth falls towards the moon faster than the water on the far side.
Right.
So the water on the far side looks like it's bulging up, but really it's lagging behind. It's not falling toward the moon as fast.
Okay.
It's a weird way to think about it, but that explains the tides.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So now we have tides and we have Earth rotating. The Earth is rotating the same direction the moon is orbiting the Earth. The moon is lifting water, if you think about it that way, up. And then the Earth is rotating. But as that happens, the moon rotates once a month, orbits once a month. The Earth rotates
as
once
we
a
have
day.
established, almost a month.
Yeah. And the Earth rotates once a day.
Mm-hmm.
So as the Earth is very quickly rotating under the moon, the tides are getting lifted up and then smashing into continents.
Right. Yeah. That's at the coastlines.
And it causes drag.
Drag?
Because as that bulge piles up on one side of the continent, it kind of gets left behind.
Yeah.
And now the moon, it gets left behind. Now the moon is behind it and is pulling on the water, but the water can't move because there's a continent in the way. And that little hill, the moon is pulling.
Yeah.
And there's a hill there. And it's going in the wrong direction. It slows the Earth down.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pulling places, and the place it's pulling is always changing. And so a place that was previously pulling is now not being pulled.
That's true. The entire effect depends upon how much shallow water there is near the equator. That's where the greatest effect of this is. So hot tides at the North and South Pole, they don't mean that much. But when you have tides, in the temperate, in the tropical locations, they literally slow the Earth down and speed the moon up.
Speed the moon up?
Because that bulge of water the moon is pulling it, the water is pulling on the moon.
Yeah.
And the Earth is turning, and that bulge of water yanks the moon forward and slows the Earth down.
So does this mean that as it's constantly going through this cycle every day or over the months, that because of the push and pull, that ultimately as the millennia go by, it's able to force planet Earth to not slow down very quickly? Like if this pull and push was not taking place in general over thousands of years, would Earth slow down more quickly over time?
The amount of slowing depends upon how far away the moon is and how much shallow seas there are, because you need that drag. Deep oceans don't have much of a tide at all. And it makes it very difficult to calculate, but we can currently measure how much the Earth is slowing down, how much the moon is speeding up, and how far away the moon is. See, that energy has to go somewhere, right? There's a law in physics. You can't destroy energy. You can convert it to other forms of energy, but it must be conserved. Conservation of energy is a law, period. That's why perpetual motion machines will never work. So we have the Earth slowing down, the angular momentum. There's a lot of energy being transferred somewhere. The moon is not rotating. Its one face is always pointing toward the Earth. It rotates once a month. And so it's not going to spinning the moon any faster. It's going into the gravitational potential energy of the moon. It's just this weird thing where the moon is moving away from us. The energy is not going to, it's slowing the Earth down, but it's not speeding the moon up. It's moving the moon away from us.
So would that be something that we could tell with the naked eye if we could just glimpse into a day 6,000 years ago versus today?
No, but if NASA astronauts happened to leave a corner reflector mirror on the moon, which they did, we could bounce lasers off the moon and measure how long it takes to come back. Laser interferometry.
Yeah, measuring the speed of a laser.
Absolutely. And so we know that the moon is moving away from us. Not much, and even in century mark, not much, but we can definitely measure it. And we know that the Earth is slowing down. Not by much, you have to measure it over centuries, but we know per year how much it's slowing down.
Now, is this a pretty good example of how we know that the universe is not more than, or should I say that the solar system is not more than a few tens of thousands of years old? Because if we went back in time enough, millions of years, the moon would just be too close, too strangely chaotic for oceans and
yes and no.
pulls and pushes.
Yes and no.
Yeah.
It is true that the moon can't get too close to the Earth. There's something called the Roche limit.
The Roche.
And that is, we know the gravitational attraction of all the moon particles, the force of gravity on the moon. If you get a little too close to the Earth's gravity on one side of the moon is greater than the moon's self-gravity compared to the other side, and the moon would break up. So you can't get too close or you fall apart.
Are there any examples of planets plus their moons where we can actually see this elsewhere in space?
Rings of Saturn?
Yeah?
Probably not.
Okay.
Because there are a lot of things closer in than the rings. I don't know. Depends on the distance, but it also depends on how fast the Earth is rotating. Because we have geosynchronous satellites, right?
Yes.
Those satellites orbit the Earth in 24 hours, which means they never move if they're on the equator. If they're at a higher latitude, they will actually go up and down every day because they're on an elliptical orbit and it looks like they're moving north and south, but they're always left and right in the same place in the sky.
Right.
East and west are always in the same place. Okay, so we have geosynchronous satellites.
Mm-hmm.
The moon could be geosynchronous, but it depends on how fast the Earth is spinning. If the Earth stopped spinning, let's say the Earth turned once a year, geosynchrony would have to be really far away for something to orbit the Earth once a year. If the Earth is moving really fast, something has to be a lot closer in to orbit the same speed that the Earth is rotating.
I think that most people wouldn't have thought of that because they would just imagine that the Earth's own gravitational force, just by being a giant rock, plus the moon's velocity and its gravity, is enough to just keep the moon in its orbit as it is. Yeah, we're not even taking into account the rotation of the Earth, plus the water, the bodies of water, plus the effect of mountains and continents in the way of the water. And now you're saying there's a noticeable way that the Earth's rotation in a single day affects the moon's orbit and its speed.
Yeah, it's all really crazy.
But there's a lot happening.
We haven't even gotten the corals yet.
Yeah, because I was going to say...
we're getting there. We're getting there.
What does this got to do with going around the Earth in 80 days? And what does this got to do with ice caps in the Ice Age?
We have to ease into the physics and ease into the...
Next year, you're going to tell me that coral grew on woolly mammoths or something.
No, I'm not going to say that. All right, so we have a very complex system. If you take the moon today and you measure how fast it's receding, you can back calculate it and conclude that the Earth-Moon system can't be more than a few million years old. Because any older, it would be inside the Roche limit and the whole thing falls apart. So that's a giant mystery, a huge physics mystery for the millions of years idea. Now, the out clause is that it all depends upon the distribution of the continents.
Oh, right.
So plate tectonics, Gondwana, Laurentia, all the old, supposed continental organizations, that changes the amount of drag. And so now all bets are off. So you have to recalculate everything, and it's extremely complicated. And honestly, I don't think anyone can do it.
Yeah, so you're saying it's not like human genetics where you can understand genetics well enough to put together Eve's genome, but just by understanding mutations and all the information in genes.
It's a lot more complicated than that, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Because it's not like earthquakes always happen in the same places and all the continents are drifting at the same rates in the same directions.
Exactly.
Or that they're all a distribution of the same amount of open exposed land.
Exactly.
Because mountains are various and valleys are various.
Exactly. Very smart. Good analysis. So the creationist argument that the Earth-Moon system can't be tens of millions of years old is true, except we can't know.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Now, the evolutionary answer is, this and this and this, but they're just...
It's not like there's evidence for it, but they're just theorizing.
Yeah. Theoretically, there are ways to get around the problem. Fine. So it's not a slam dunk argument anymore.
So if conditions were different in the past,
there would be less
there could be
tidal slowing of the Earth's rotation. All right. Now we're getting the corals.
You're going to tell me that the corals are pulling the moon towards our ice caps.
And the woolly mammoths. No. There is an old argument that since the Earth is slowing down, that means that in the past, it must have been rotating faster.
You say this is an old argument?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it has to be true because we know the moon is slowing the Earth down. It's not much now, but if you stretch it out over, hundreds of millions of years, it's going to have a big effect.
Okay, so the slowdown would have been at a much more accelerated slowing down rate.
Back in the day, in the evolutionary Paleozoic era, people estimate there was 400 days per year instead of 365.
What? Okay, so the rotation was faster than our orbit around the sun.
Yes, since we're rotating faster in 1 year, we would rotate more times.
Yeah. So so the time it took us to get around the sun wasn't all that different, but the time it took for the Earth to spin was faster.
Was less, like a 22-hour day.
And so if you just truncate a day by 2 hours, if it's that much faster, then it's able to be how many days in a year? 400 and what?
About 400-ish.
That's amazing. I like rounded off numbers, none of this 365 stuff.
That's right. Well, I said ish.
Yeah.
Because remember, it changes over time.
Okay. We might as well go back to 365.
That's okay. I like that. 0.25. Because of leap year. Yeah. Anyway, sir. All right. So we have this argument that the Earth is rotating slower now than in the past, and there would have been more days in the past per year. So geologists go looking. And one of the big guys in the coral reef world, Wells, Wells, big name in the coral reef world, 1960 to 1963. He studies some Paleozoic corals, and he concludes 392 days in a year.
What? Why?
Slam dunk.
Oh, okay.
Paleozoic,
wow.
Many millions of years ago, he says 392 days in a year.
Yeah, okay.
So it sounds like a great argument. Biologos, they had a poster that they made once.
Can you introduce Biologos for our listeners?
Biologos is an organization started by Dr. Francis Collins, who's director of the Human Genome Project, director of the National Institutes of Health now.
Okay.
And several other people. And basically, they set this thing up to counter young Earth creationism in the sciences. And they've been working really hard as theistic evolutionists. We've written a lot on creation.com. There's going to be a lot of show notes for this one, by the way, because I've written several articles on this exact topic.
Next, you're going to tell me that there are 6 stones the universe created to control gravity, time, and oceans, and Thanos is after them.
I have one in my back pocket. Don't tell him. Anyway, so this organization called Biologos, and they're an old, we call them old Earth organization if you want to, but whatever. They came out with a poster a couple years ago. X number of reasons why we know the Earth is millions of years old, and one of them was coral banding. So
this is like a tree ring is coral banding is comparable?
That's what people think.
Okay.
And they're basing it on Wells's conclusions.
So in order to see a coral band, would you just like cut it and see the rings on the inside? Is that the idea?
You think so?
Okay.
That's how it's painted in the literature, and it's how it's brought to us in the media.
See, the thing is, though, I think of coral as being more akin to bushes than trees. They just got a lot of spindly branches. So
for the branching corals, what about the boulder corals?
Boulder corals, I hadn't
smooth
taken that
surface,
into account.
As smooth as a bald man's head.
Okay,
and about the same size and shape too. Interestingly,
no relation.
No, of course not.
Not in the human genome.
But there are boulder corals or branching corals. There are thinly branching corals and thickly branching corals and everything in between.
So are they just that different from the branching corals then? Like the boulder corals would have a very different result?
For this argument, you wouldn't be able to use a branching coral.
Okay.
Most branching corals anyway.
Okay. Because I didn't think so. That's where my mind was going.
But as a coral grows, for a big, I have seen single coral colonies bigger than your bedroom.
When you say colonies.
One animal.
Yeah.
Bigger than your house.
Yeah.
One animal. One massive rock made by an animal. It's only a few millimeters thick, but it spreads out. It sheets out across a massive surface. And as it grows, it's putting calcium carbonate down underneath its surface. So that's the skeleton is actually an exoskeleton. And it's only on the bottom.
It's so wild. It sounds like something out of an alien sci-fi film.
Oh yeah, these would make a great, if you zoomed up on them and made them big, this would make a great alien because they're vicious predators on a tiny little scale. Anyway, we have this sheet of tissue that's making a rock. And year after year after year, it grows bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's leaving stuff behind. And the stuff it's leaving behind is a skeleton which might record a record of growth rate. Now, here's where it gets tricky. You can take a drill and core a coral colony. I've done this. You take a hole saw on an air drill with a scuba tank under your arm, and you drill underwater, and he can take a core out of a colony. It's really cool. If you slice that thin and put it under an X-ray, you can see dense bands and non-dense bands. You can actually do a CAT scan of it or a CT scan, and you can get density bands, but it's not tree rings because it's vertical, right? Trees are horizontal rings. This is a vertical coral as it's growing up, sometimes growing faster, sometimes growing slower.
Okay, I'm with you so far.
Okay, or, see, here's the question. We don't necessarily know what the density bands are. It's the skeleton in that area is thicker than in other areas. Is that because it didn't have as much food? Was the water too cold?
If it was up to me, I would have assumed it was variables like that. Like there was a good year for food or a good year for growth and another year's bad.
But some of the corals are clearly annual. Some of them put density bands down, denser bands down in the winter. Some of them put denser bands down in the summer. But they're clearly annual because you can take a coral colony, put a plastic bag around it, and put a stain, a specific purplish stain in there, and let it, fill up the water around the coral for a while. It'll soak into the skeleton.
And it'll affect all of it down?
Just the surface of the skeleton.
Okay.
Then you come back several years later and take a core, and under fluorescent light, you can see the band plus everything that's grown since.
Wow.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
But that's not what we're talking about these Paleozoic corals. It's nothing to do with it at all.
Okay.
The crazy thing is that there's two...
You really buried the lead. I'm waiting for this.
Well, there's actually several more bandings we have to talk about too.
Okay.
If there's a coral that's any coral reef growing near a river mouth, even maybe 100 miles away from the river mouth, but if the water from the river is mixing with the seawater and flowing out to the coral reef, there's a lot of tannins, broken down leaves, brown, like tea.
Yeah.
It's like tea, exactly.
Yeah, sure.
The tannins in the water will soak into the coral skeleton.
Coral likes tea.
And sometimes under a black light, you can see fluorescent bands, reddish fluorescent bands from like the rainy season and the dry season, or a particular big storm that had, maybe a hurricane or something, washed a lot of brown water out into the reef. It'll stain the coral skeleton. Totally different type of banding. Has nothing to do with the growth rates.
Okay, so does that mean it kind of confuses the data?
No, because it looks different.
Okay.
But when I hear reporters talking about these things, they jumble it all together.
They're calling bands. They're all just bands.
Yeah, they're all just bands. And then there's two basic ways to grow for a coral. Some of them literally are sitting on top of their skeleton. So there'll be if there's like a polyp, there's a cup. Think of like a Dixie cup stuck into a rock. But then there's pieces of coral tissue connecting all the Dixie cups. So it's only on the surface. And when it wants to grow higher, the bottom of the corals lifts up. It'll put down a new floor. And then a little while later, lift up again and put down a new floor. A little while later, lift up again and put down a new floor. Well, the spacing between those floors probably affects the density of the skeleton. So how fast is it reflooring? But there's other corals where they permeate the skeleton. Maybe the first centimeter or so, there's rock there, but the little coral gooey stuff is actually in channels and holes in the rock.
Okay.
And so when it grows, it just kind of oozes upwards and lays more floor down. It's a totally different growth style.
In the same type of coral or in
Different
another
species.
Type? Okay.
Different families, different branches of the coral family tree.
Yeah. As different as like, say, a robin to your
eagle.
hawk or an
Yeah,
eagle.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right. So we have diversity of growth form in corals. We also have diversity in lifestyles. There are some corals that live only on the wave-swept, shallow fore reef. Those are the ones that scuba divers like to go see. There are other corals that live in brackish, muddy water in seagrass beds. I had a roommate in college. He's from Germany in grad school. And he came back from a field trip to the Florida Keys. And he's hopping up and down. And he's saying, I can finally explain the coral reefs of Germany. I was like, what are you talking about? He goes, in my area, every year, farmers would dredge up or plow up coral heads in their fields. And he goes, I've seen them now in the wild. Because between Key Largo, Florida, one of the northern Florida Keys, and a mangrove island offshore was a flat mud bank with lots of seagrass, only maybe a foot or two deep. And he said all through that seagrass bed are Porites finger coral.
Porites
is a genus, and they look literally like fingers.
Okay.
He says they're everywhere, and it's exactly the same thing the farmers are dredging up in Germany.
Off the coast, well away from the coast?
No, inland, in the middle of the continent.
Yeah.
So what this was, it was an embayment, probably from the Mediterranean, early post-flood, and corals grew, and then the water went down because of the ice age and never came back up all the way again, and all these corals are now marooned and buried in dirt on land.
Wow.
All right, this is corals.
You're going to say there's corals on the moon.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Good sci-fi. Big scary corals eating the astronauts. No. All right, so I just watched with my sister last week Avatar for the second time. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there are Christmas tree worms. Like his first night, he touches this curly thing that pops down into the ground.
Yeah.
That is a Christmas tree worm. I've seen thousands of them. Every time I see them on the reef, I got to go up and make them pop down. And there's other things in there. Obviously, this guy pulled from the coral world.
Wow.
So cool stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So now we're talking about backwater muddy areas. The corals that live there tend to have different life cycles. They tend to be quick reproducers. They tend not to do the massive broadcast spawning that the corals on the reef do. They will not release eggs and sperm into the water, billions and billions of them at the same time. They have internal fertilization, and which means there's male and female colonies, interestingly.
Wow.
And the little babies will grow inside the parent, and then during the full moon, swim out the mouth and swim away and land, and boom, you got a brand new coral. Wow. So you don't have to go through the fertilization and all the cleavage cycles and gastrulation and blastulation and all those complicated things in embryogenesis. It happens inside the coral.
So when the offspring is leaving, is that a relatively quick process for it to swim away? You said with full moon? There's the full moon again that we talked about last episode.
Yeah.
Is that a relatively quick swim for a coral
They can literally
offspring?
land right next to the parent.
Okay, so it's not like it's like really on a journey like baby spiders far away from its mother.
The other corals, the broadcast spawners, those larvae will float for a month, at least weeks.
Wow.
Before they can land anywhere. So they do not land on the same reef.
Wow.
But these other corals, they're ready to go as soon as they pop out. You can look under a microscope and you can see them swimming around inside the parent coral.
Wow.
Beautiful.
That is amazing.
You remember the cartoon The Shmoo?
No, the shmoo.
Old. I'm dating myself here. It actually predates me too. But it's a ghosty thing. Sort of like Casper, but it was the Shmoo.
I knew about Casper.
Okay. Take away the arms and the eyeballs of Casper, and that's what a baby coral looks like.
Okay.
It's like a fat bowling pin.
Yeah.
And they have a top and a bottom, and they swim because they have cilia, and they land and they root and they grow into a coral.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so we have different forms of coral, different growth styles, different life strategies, all this crazy stuff. Now, let's talk about Paleozoic corals. Now, Paleozoic, that means old life, Paleozoic. This is before dinosaurs. In the evolutionary dating scheme and in their fossil record, Paleozoic is really old stuff.
Okay.
There are some corals that they call them horn corals. They're about as big as your thumb. Tabulate corals, maybe as big as your laptop. Maybe if you're lucky.
That's why they're called tabula corals. Reminds me of like a smart tablet.
Oh, interesting. Well, what happens is they grow in layers. Looks like tables stacked on top of each other.
Oh.
They're really, really cool looking. The biggest one I've ever seen is in a photograph in one of these papers that'll be referenced in the show notes. And is at a museum in Germany. It's maybe 3 feet across.
3 feet across?
Maybe.
Wow.
Easy to grow in the 1600 years between creation and the flood. Easy to grow. So big mystery. There are no coral reefs in the ancient fossil record.
Okay, so
There
you're
are
saying
corals,
yeah.
but there are no reefs. There's no Great Barrier Reef in
Yeah.
the Paleozoic. There's no Great Barrier Reef in the Mesozoic. There are things that geologists call reefs. They might have sponges in them or something like that. It's just a pile of calcium carbonate. And very often it's calcium carbonate mud, which is not a coral reef. Coral reef is rock.
So the theory goes that there would have been corals in the Paleozoic, but where are they? They're just missing.
There are coral-like organisms in the Paleozoic,
Okay.
but they're not the same thing as the modern corals.
So in the theoretical, in the evolutionary theory, then the modern corals are the descendants, the evolved version of whatever their ancestors were in the Paleozoic?
Nobody knows. Because there's a giant gap in the fossil record between the end of the Paleozoic and the early Mesozoic. With Mesozoic, we have the Triassic, the Jurassic, and the Cretaceous. And then the end of the Cretaceous is supposedly the big meteor that kills off the dinosaurs. But there's some Triassic corals that look like modern corals. But they're supposedly millions of years after the other corals disappear. So there's no direct link in the geology, but also coral skeletons are made of calcium carbonate. Same thing cement is made of. Same thing chalk is made of. Calcium carbonate has different crystalline forms. Modern corals are made of something called aragonite. Just fancy word. When you take aragonite and expose it to fresh water, it dissolves.
So it's like chalk that dissolves.
Yeah. And it'll recrystallize in a form we call calcite. Calcite's almost clear. It's more translucent. Aragonite's white. Different crystalline forms of calcium carbonate. Aragonite and calcite.
Okay.
Modern reef corals have aragonite skeletons. These ancient Paleozoic corals had calcite skeletons. So there's different biochemistry.
So they're an extinct type of coral, but we've got them. We can see them. We know what they look like.
Yeah. And we know it's calcite skeleton because if you take aragonite...
But they're extinct
and they're
as
extinct.
a creature. Wow.
Yeah, they're extinct. They have a different biochemistry. They also have a different growth form. Modern corals, they're called hexacorals. A coral, even though it looks like it's round, the polyp, there's a left and a right.
Okay.
And the little larvae that swims has a top and a bottom. They're not radially symmetric. Like you look at a jellyfish, right? A jellyfish looks like it's a circle.
Yeah.
It's not radially symmetric. There's a left and a right to it.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
given the not exactly organs, but its internals,
exactly.
even though it's bulbous on the top.
You take a coral colony, and if you look at it, there's these ridges. Looks like slices of a pizza, but they're not sliced in 8 pieces. They're sliced in 6 pieces. There's a septa, a ridge that runs top to bottom, and then 2 more. It's like an X, and you divide them into 6 pieces.
Right.
They're called the hexacorals. These ancient Paleozoic corals are in sets of 5, pentacorals.
Oh man. Okay. So I'm just gonna get this out there. If you're one of our regular listeners, maybe your mind went here too. Could this be based on a mutation? Could these extinct corals have just been the ancestors of modern coral, but thanks to a mutation, they have changed the way that they grow and they're...
That is how the evolutionists would explain it.
Okay, so they would say that the modern coral is just thanks to a mutation.
Possibly.
Yeah, okay. So that it's not extinct.
But they wouldn't know when, because if corals are soft-bodied, before they started making skeletons in the evolutionary record, they were supposedly soft-bodied. We don't know what they would have looked like or how long ago the supposed mutation would have happened. It's all guesswork. All right, here's the point. They look different.
I've been waiting for this.
Yeah.
Drum roll, please.
They look different. They have a different chemistry, and they're extinct. And now we want to use them to figure out the day length.
Oh.
Everything about them is different than modern corals.
When you say we want to, do you mean, is this a bad idea or do you mean this is a very good idea?
Well, Wells, the great coral reef guy, 1962 publishes a paper and he claims that there are 392 days in a year.
In the Paleozoic.
On banding. But it's not banding like the earlier banding we talked about. He's looking at the outside of the skeleton and he's seeing these ridges. Sometimes they're closer together than others. He goes, oh. And somehow he goes and counts 392 bands per year. And that's what all of this is based on.
That seems really arbitrary. So am I wrong?
Jerry Coyne writes a book called Why Evolution is True. And he uses this as an example, how we know the Earth is millions of years old. Biologos uses this on their poster, how we know the Earth is millions of years old. Lots and lots of people repeat this claim from 1962.
And it all goes back to Wales.
Wells. Say it again. Wells. Not Wales. Wells.
And it all goes back to Wells.
Yes, and he was contradicted the next year in print.
Wait. Wells was?
Yes.
During his lifetime.
But yes. So he's one of the greats. It's a guy named on almost a nobody. Now he's a scientist and he's around for decades, but no one knows about him. He's a guy named Scruton.
Scruton.
And
it doesn't have a name that rings like Wells.
No, it doesn't. The next year, he publishes the paper. He says, I cannot find any annual bands.
Any annual band. So what would an annual band mean? It has a different appearance?
Don't know. Nobody knows what Wells was looking at. But he says, but I see monthly signatures.
Monthly signatures?
Remember the corals that live in the muddy areas that release larvae according to the full moon monthly? They're putting a lot of energy into baby production, and they're doing it on a monthly cycle.
Yeah.
So maybe they're trading off skeletal growth for baby production.
So it creates its monthly band.
Maybe. Remember, these are extinct corals that are different than all modern corals. We can only make analogs and guesses.
Yeah, good
But
point.
the claim was contradicted the year after it was published. He says there are no annual bands. And what this guy did is in these monthly things, the same number of days per month as in a modern month.
Man. Okay.
So clearly this claim is wrong. Now, granted, if the moon was closer...
And his name was Scruton?
Yeah.
Okay, so is this like a new find, what Scruton said? Is this you just came across?
No, because as soon as I heard this, I said, wait a second, this isn't true. I knew from my PhD work, all these coral classes I've taken.
Okay.
And coral geology and coral physiology and PhD level things. I said, wait a second. I knew who Wells is, and I looked it up, and it didn't take me too long to find this other guy, and boom, answered. Wells was making something up, and he was wrong. And so this claim is being bandied about by certain scientific organizations, and it was disproven 50 years ago. Ouch.
Yeah.
So, how many days in a year in the past? I have no idea. It all depends upon how old the Earth is, how old the moon is, how long it's been receding, what the recession rate is through a bunch of unknown parameters. And the biggest example that they have is an extinct, strange little muddy water animal that's different than any animal alive today. So this actually, I just submitted an article to creation.com on this exact topic, but it's my third one. First one went in the Journal of Creation, and then someone wrote a question. I tried to fix it and answer it a little better. And then someone else just sent me, one of my good friends said, my friend is reading this. He's in graduate school now in geology. And he's saying this stuff, and I don't know how to answer it. And this is Jerry Coyne's book. And it looks like my friend has just said, okay, I give up. Evolution is true. But the argument, now there's a lot of other arguments out there, fine. But this particular argument doesn't actually work.
Yeah.
But in order to get, look what we had to do. We had to talk about physics and gravity and geology, physiology, chemistry in order to answer the question.
Yeah. Wow.
My friends, this is why science is important.
Yeah. This is why thoroughness is important.
This is why thoroughness is important and why science is so fun too. I mean, this is like a gigantic, Sherlock Holmes mystery. Mm-hmm. But in order to get there, you got to dig.
You'd have to know a thing or two about the moon before you figure this out about corals.
That's right.
That's awesome. Wow.
My favorite physics thing is what causes tides. It took me forever, I mean, literally years, to figure out how to explain it. Every example I've ever heard before, they're wrong. Or if they do say it right, it's so complicated. Talking about centripetal and centrifugal forces and this and that. No, it's just the Earth is falling toward the moon. The close side falls faster than the far side. But the Earth can't fall at different speeds because it's a rock, but the water can. So water on the close side to the moon is falling faster than the Earth, and the Earth is falling faster than the water on the far side. And you get a bulge on both sides.
Wow.
That's how you explain tides.
This is huge. Well, we are running out of time.
Too bad.
Are you ready to wrap up? I feel like you just laid the groundwork for so much more.
I've said everything I wanted to say on this topic.
Okay.
But each one of the points can just be explored deeper and more fully. So
yeah, could be. Well, thanks so much for joining us on this quest. Rob, that was an amazing one. If you want to dig deeper into these topics, you can find all the links to stuff that Rob was discussing on the show notes on the website, or hop over to nightowl.fm/equinox/13. That's where you're going to find the show notes. But if you're already in your podcast app, you'll find them right there. Those show notes are always along with the episode. And you should also check out Rob's science videos at biblicalgenetics.com, or his Facebook page or his YouTube channel, where you can see the videos and join the discussions in the comments. And if you want to catch up with me, I'm at JCS Darnell on Twitter. Until next time, goodbye, Rob.
Goodbye, Joe.
And thanks everyone for listening to Equinox.
I'm glad we did that. That was fun.